So I just wanted to throw out there that this session is going to be about how to help business transform with AI. So it's not necessarily going to be at all about how individuals can transform. So if the business side is not interesting to you, feel free. I'm not offended. You can leave and go to another session because this won't really be helpful from an individual standpoint. With that said, from the business standpoint, I also want to clarify. So what my Blue Fox Labs essentially does is it was a company that was started unintentionally when I moved to Pittsburgh and I started doing AI for the university. A bunch of my friends that were in that are in private equity contacted me and they said, "Hey, we need help with AI." I said, "What do you mean by that?" They said, "We don't know." And so went into these companies, and if you know private equity, these companies have to move fast. They've got to do something that works. It's not a science experiment because it's direct dollars and value in their portfolio companies. And so what was really interesting was we had to figure out how to quickly actually build solutions that would build value into these companies right before they were sold. And it started to make me think that this is very similar to the process of flipping a house, right? That you buy this house, this dilapidated house or whatnot, then you got to make only key improvements because you can't renovate the whole house. So you've got to, figure out what's the highest value renovation. Like many times the kitchen, you update the kitchen to a modern kitchen, people are like, wow, right? And so in the case of private equity, investment bankers are like, wow, like that's a better company now, and we'll pay you more money for it. And so that's really where this is coming from. If you're part of a large company like IBM is a very strong presence here. I realize I'm meeting so many IBM people, which is awesome. I have great respect for IBM. I don't know how much this would work within an IBM environment because we're talking about doing things and changing the business within like 2 to 3 months. So I don't know how much that works in a larger environment. All right. So with that said, we are down. It didn't like what I was saying. Maybe it's my clicker. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so hello. Okay, one more thing before there we go. The Unstoppable AI Roadmap, and it's gone again. So I also want to say that on BlueFoxInsights.ai, I will be releasing this presentation as a course by tonight because we recorded it and did all the post-processing. So if you want a bit more detail, because this is going to be a bit quick, it'll be on my site as an actual course. All right. So I think the big idea, and I don't have it by memory, but it's something like there you go, transforming your business with AI is like renovating an old home. Take it one room at a time. I apologize for this kind of analogy if this is too kind of elementary for you, but it's helpful for me, and so hopefully it's a bit helpful for yourself. Okay, turn this on. All right. So there are a lot of points, but we're gonna go through these. First, the businesses that we've dealt with, and by the way, private equity doesn't mean it's a small company. So some of these companies are multi-billions of dollars in revenue. So they're large companies. So this works for big and small that we found. Committing to a prototyping strategy, the role of modern data platforms, migrating and integrating data, designing and building a prototype, measuring success and scaling prototypes, and then transforming together as a company. Let's go through these one by one. So first, committing to a prototyping strategy. I mentioned this in the beginning, but I think where a lot of companies are going wrong nowadays with AI is that they're putting these massive investments into AI. And so they put these massive budget lines. And these budget lines could be in the tens of millions, it could be in the hundreds of millions. And I'm just throwing this out there that I don't care how big of a company you are. I don't know how smart it is, especially with regards to how immature these technologies are, to be putting hundreds of millions of dollars, unless you're literally Microsoft building data centers and buying GPUs. Okay, I guess that makes sense, right? But with regards to applying these technologies, it doesn't make sense. And the analogy I give is that's just like the no house flipper, a good house flipper is going to rip down the whole house and then make a new house. That makes absolutely no sense. But I've seen in the news, at least, none that I've worked with, companies that are saying things like, we spent X amount of dollars and we find almost no value. And now places like Sequoia Capital are saying, like, is there really any return on investment on AI? Well, it might be because you went about it in a way that was irresponsible. And so instead, we talk to companies and we say, start small, but think big. So let's work on something where it's a very, very bite-sized prototype, but that the actual value to the company could be very, very big, right? And we actually challenge, and I really mean this, we decline projects if we think that they're not going to work, no matter how much money we can get for them, because we know long term that's going to be frustrating for us and it's just terrible business. So what we tend to do is we do what's called an AI dream session. And by the way, this is not me pitching my business, so whether or not you work with Blue Fox Labs, just telling you the process that we think has worked for us. We bring in people that are going to actually use whatever these solutions are, the leadership, right? And then we'll usually do some kind of 2 to 3 day session, which we call the AI dream sessions. And then we start to talk mostly about the business. Tell us about your business. We're not going to talk about AI for at least a day or two. You tell us about your business, we understand what you're trying to do, we understand the problems that your business has. And then at some point, once we have a pretty good understanding, then we go through, what can AI really do today? Now, for most people, what we find, again, business leaders, and that's why we created Blue Fox Insights, it's very hard to find information as to what AI can really do today. Because no offense, right? Most companies, like, marketing has a function, right? And so sometimes the technologies are not up to the level upon which the marketing suggests. Or, for example, right now, one of the biggest things that companies want to figure out how to do is, how do I use AI to talk to my data, my company data, and ask questions against my company data, right? So then, the technologies that are being thrown around right now are called RAG, retrieval augmented generation with vector databases and fine tuning and all these things, which, by the way, on my site, I've got an explanation for business leaders as to why RAG, fine tuning, small language models, they're not mature enough right now. And why companies that are investing in these things, especially large scale, you're seeing it not work. Because we're at a state where businesses are hungry for this functionality, but the technology is not mature enough to support that hunger. And so there's a lot of kind of disconnect. And so you have to figure out, what does your business want to do? And then get a realistic picture of what can the technology actually do. Additionally, with the prototyping process, what we found is that it's got to be fast. It's got to be literally like weekly shipping of prototypes, of each delivery of the prototype, because every week we learn something new as to why it works or it doesn't work. Now, by the way, the way that we can ship so fast is using Gen AI with regards to in private and secure environments in a lot of our deployments. And then again, we focus on value. One of the things that we do, which is interesting, is that I have 2 co-founders. One of my co-founders is a PhD in social psych, but he's a master's in statistics. So he's one of the best statisticians that I know. And he really will, if the company especially lets us do this, we'll calculate the numbers as to, all right, how much money are you spending on this prototype? And then how much value do we believe in literal either increase of revenue or a reduction of liabilities? What are the confidence intervals with regards to the outcomes of this project? And especially with private equity, that's kind of like the whole conversation. It's like, again, like house flipping. Is, okay, you invest in this, and whatever you invest in, you want a 10x return in what you just invested in, so let's figure out what project will provide you with that. For a big company, this sounds like crazy, but I would suggest that I really think this could happen even in larger, public companies. It's just that typically the way that this works is that there's some kind of R&D department, they're doing prototyping, it's kind of a cost center, these kind of things. I don't think that's going to work moving forward, in my personal opinion. I think things have to literally be affecting the direct bottom line as you're prototyping AI, or people are going to lose interest and focus on what the technology can do. And then understanding that if you're really trying to do this, more and more consulting services, I mean the big players, right? Accenture, Deloitte, McKinsey, these players, they're realizing that one of the big gaps with regards to companies having success with these technologies is that piece of what can the technology actually do right now? And then being able to help with figuring out what's the match between what the technology can do right now and what is your actual business need. That's essentially probably the most differentiating part of my tiny company, which is, and the reason why I think we get, ridiculous business for our size is because I think we're really good at just saying, honestly, the technology can't do that, right? It just cannot do that right now. So let's not waste time in trying to make it work when it's not going to work. And that piece, it's not really out there. So this is one of the hardest things with regards to getting started. And so you will probably need help with that idea and that plan. And my hope is that companies will learn to grow this within their companies. And is why, coming from the previous keynote talk, is that I would love for companies to be able to build this kind of talent from within. My hope is that Blue Fox Labs in 5 to 10 years does not exist, because we don't need to exist anymore, because companies will have figured this out. Okay, so once you get bought into the idea of kind of this really rapid prototyping and really trying to figure out what can the technology do, the biggest thing that has to happen that is really hard for companies is that you need to have some sense of, or you need to have some implementation of a modern data platform. What do I mean by modern data platform? I mean, there's many out there, but I'll just throw out the two big ones, which is Snowflake and Databricks. I have no even reseller relationship with them. I don't work for those companies. We build a lot of Snowflake and we build a lot of Databricks. The third one I would throw out there that we just recently started working with, but it doesn't apply to most companies because it's like really, it's on-prem and it's very expensive, is Vast Data. But if you're somebody that's working with data centers that are having direct connection to GPUs and you need latency and speed, you should be probably looking at something like a Vast Data, which is a pretty phenomenal technology. So these modern data platforms, basically the key is you've got legacy data sitting in legacy data systems, right? And when I say legacy, I even mean things like Oracle, right? I'm not being negative towards Oracle, and I know that they're making their own version of modern data platform, so they're trying to build this from within, right? But like old ERPs, some industries like law or whatnot, I mean, it's like literally systems that were created by some private company that doesn't exist today, right? In some weird format. You got to get those into things like Snowflake, Databricks, Vast, or other modern data platforms. Why? Because all the AI APIs and workloads at this point, they are integrated for these systems. They do not integrate well into your older data systems, right? But what ends up happening is that a lot of companies will say, consulting companies that are going to help you with this stuff, is that, just to be fully honest, they got to cover their overhead. They got to, it's a thing, right? So they're going to want to build you a massive deployment of Snowflake or Databricks or whatever, right? Vast, you can't even do small, so that's a massive deployment. But that's not to your advantage, right? Because the reality is, with something like Snowflake or Databricks, you can build it really small. It's consumption-based, right? Especially something like Databricks. It's literally like the compute and storage, I believe. It's all in one price, right? So it's like OpEx, consumption-based. So what we tell our customers is, let's just build you the secure, if you don't have a secure cloud tenant, right? Let's first build you a secure cloud tenant wherever you want to be, in Azure, AWS, Google, it's fine. Oracle Cloud, whatever. Create you that secure cloud tenant, and then let's create you a very secure but small instance of Snowflake or Databricks, right? And then let's only pipe in the data from the legacy systems that we think is going to be valuable for this prototyping exercise. So you got to understand what that does. First of all, it enables us to have speed. Second of all, you're not paying for this massive Snowflake or Databricks instance during this prototyping because it's consumption-based. Third, data migration is really hard, right? That's the part that people are like, okay, I have a new Snowflake data warehouse. Okay, but it's empty, right? You got to pipe data in. I'm like, oh, let's pipe data in. And most companies will say, just build the Databricks for us or build the Snowflake for us because we don't have anybody that can do that, and then we'll do the data migration. And I always know in the back of my head, you're coming back to us in like a month or two, and you're gonna say, oh, we thought we could do the data migration, but nobody wants to do it in our company, or nobody knows how to do it. And then we say, okay, like let's look at your data. It's like bad, right? So then you got to get it migrated over, but just focus on small. And the analogy that I give is like, okay, if you've decided to update your kitchen in this house flip because you think the kitchen is going to bring the most wow factor, right? Well, you have to potentially upgrade the electrical and the plumbing that nobody sees, but it's absolutely required. It's foundationally required to actually do a modern update to your kitchen. And I'm emphasizing this because this is the piece that nobody sees, but that drives all of AI. Anybody that's doing cutting edge things in AI, they have some form of modern data platform set up and behind it. And if you don't, you have to think about investing in these technologies. But you don't have to invest much. You can start I'm talking about hundreds of dollars small. Okay, I think every company can afford not paying for our services, but like the actual cloud instance of these things. Okay, hundreds of dollars small, and go from there. So you have to go through this step of migrating and integrating the data. So our thoughts with data migration, one thing that I've thrown out at the University of Pittsburgh is, how there's like, back in the day, I don't know if you remember this, but when machine learning was very new, there were no actual tools and frameworks to help people do this. So everybody was writing their own code to do like multiple regression and stuff like that. It was crazy. And then somebody was like, hey, let's create sklearn. And they were like, oh my gosh, like scikit. And then later on, we're doing deep learning, and it was actually Facebook, I think, that said, let's create TensorFlow, right? And then I forget which company created PyTorch, but let's create PyTorch, right? And now it's like, you're crazy if you're doing machine learning without using scikit and TensorFlow and these kind of things, right? Data migration, there's nothing like that out there that we know of that's kind of this large-scale open source consortium for figuring out like data flow and data migration for legacy data format. So I've been discussing within the university, like, let's start this thing. Like, let's create the PyTorch for data migration as a community globally, because it'd be awesome. But because those don't exist, it's really hard right now. So you got to start small. You've got to build simple pipelines. The other thing is you don't want to delete your legacy systems. What we found, and what makes total sense, is that the reason why legacy systems exist, for example, in banks, is because they are the most important systems in the whole company, right? That's why they don't touch them. Like, don't ever touch that thing. That thing's 70 years old, don't touch it. Because if you touch that thing, the bank falls apart, right? So therefore, the move is not, let's get rid of that system and move it all into this new modern data platform. It's that we got to run these two things at the same time forever, because that thing is nobody fully understands it. Keep that thing on, and then just have a pipeline going from that legacy system into this modern, let's say, Snowflake data warehouse. Well, that pipeline, over time, it becomes a spaghetti mess, and it's going to need monitoring. You got to make sure that things are, congruent on both sides. So you start with simple pipelines, but you realize that this thing is likely going to become this crazy situation, which then, for now, you have to do manual monitoring of these pipelines. This is kind of all the dirty work of real AI for a business. Is that data engineers have to be doing these manual monitoring of these pipelines from these legacy systems. But then over time, you've got to figure out how to automate this. And by the way, I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of companies started. Just like there's Splunk now, if you guys know Splunk, right? Back in the day, like searching log files and then making sure that security events are being monitored from log files. People used to do that manually, right? And now we have Splunk. Well, I think there's going to be now companies that are coming up that are doing the kind of Splunk of this, right? Because we're going to have all of these pipelines from legacy systems into modern data platforms, and all of that stuff has to be monitored. You have to be able to search those logs. And so what we try to do is, we're not trying to create that company, but what we are doing is we're helping a company build these pipelines, do manual monitoring, and then we scale it up as it's working. The big thing is, as it's working and as we show value, everybody is encouraged, everybody's motivated, they can see real results from this stuff. And then eventually it becomes into this. Blue Fox Labs has only existed for 2 years. So we are just beginning to get with certain companies that we're in like the 7th project with into this phase of comprehensive monitoring. But this is kind of the phases that we followed. We started really small with pipelines that we could just literally manually monitor every day. And then once you get past the migrating and integrating data step, oh, by the way, if anybody wants me to stop at any point, this is more just kind of my thoughts on the process. So if you have any questions, please stop me. So then you go and design and build the prototype. So to build the prototype, and this has to happen kind of as a cyclical process. So I talked about this in the beginning. You've already identified and specified the problem that you want to fix. So I'll give you a general example. Well, it's kind of more specific, but it's still pretty general. So you all know how digital advertising on the internet generally works, right? It's a real-time bidding auction. There's no humans involved. There's supply side, demand side. Like that's, beyond that, who knows how the spaghetti works, right? But you may not know that offline advertising, so TV commercials, radio commercials, these kind of things, this is still, for the most part, done by humans that are calling, like NBC, and saying, hey, I am representing Nike, and Nike wants to have 3 slots at this time, and blah, 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 right? So one of our customers, there's many of these companies out there. One of our customers was like, we want to automate that for offline, which is kind of an innovative idea, right? So besides the fact that, okay, that's an innovative idea, we asked them, like, let's calculate what this could actually do to your business if we could figure out how to make this automated, right? And so once we went through this process of trying to calculate, okay, how much would this impact your business? How hard is it going to be for us to develop a solution? Because this is not an off-the-shelf solution. This is a custom design. We recognize that over time, this would be game-changing. This would take them from being a kind of mid-tier player to probably one of the biggest players in the United States. That's an example of, that's a problem that a company, it's worth for them to put a good deal of money into figuring out if this is possible, right? This is not something where you're thinking of, I don't know, like our analysts are having a hard time with these Excel spreadsheets, so we're going to develop this, multi-hundreds of thousands or millions of dollar solution to try to fix. We're talking about business-changing problems because the technology, AI technology, is not mature enough where you should be able to you should be taking risks that have very little potential value to your company. It's got to be big value, big impact. So we still think start small and start focused. For even that company, we started with just statistical models, nothing machine learned, nothing Gen AI incorporated. It was just straight inferential statistics in the beginning. Then bring in only the data you need. The other thing is choose the right tools. So there are more and more tools that are being developed right now where instead of you building something, you can actually use the tools on top of your modern data platform. One thing that I'm going to say, just to throw this out there, because I don't know exactly all the companies represented in this room, AI technology, I mentioned, is changing so fast. And it's literally, if you follow this stuff, every day there's something new. So one of the things that I told my co-founders, because I didn't even want to start this business, but it was my private equity friends that were really pushing me to start this consulting business. And consulting is one of those things where people say, oh, don't go into consulting services and tech is bad. You got to create a product. It's all about product companies. Well, as I watched AI technology change, I realized, wait, this is kind of like when the internet started, where services companies that were helping businesses figure out the internet, there was a time when that was the thing to do because internet startups were all crashing because it was too fast. The technology was moving too fast. I think we're in that time period again right now where AI product companies that are getting funded by, Andreessen Horowitz, all these places, it's like they're coming and going so fast because the technology is changing so fast. So therefore, two things to think about. One is if you have an AI product company, it's like a really rough time right now, whereas consulting is having a heyday right now, right? The second thing to consider is that if you're trying to buy an AI product, you have to be thinking about on-ramp and off-ramp, right? This product may not exist in 6 months just because of what's going on with regards to how quickly these companies are coming up and going down. And so you have to, that's why the modern data platform is your base. And then as you put things in, think about quick integrations and then quick off-ramps if needed. So if you can find a product that does the thing right now, integrate it in for cheap, and then if you need to integrate it out or take it out, create a ability to do that. And then of course, this is just classic, build an MVP, minimum viable product, and continue to make sure that that prototype is working and has value. So then you test and you iterate. These are all just very, very simple concepts that don't just apply to AI. But again, this is the process that we followed over and over for the last 2 years and have had some success. Oh, and then document everything. One really cool thing with Gen AI is that it really is helpful with documentation. So at first, we just used Gen AI to assist our documentation by saying just all this random stuff and said, okay, make this into something that sounds reasonable as tech documentation. Where we've gotten to, if our customers are okay with it and we prove to them that, hey, the Gen AI that we're using is not just OpenAI ChatGPT, we're using a private and secure local model running on our local machine so the data is not going outside of our tenant, et cetera, is that we actually started experimenting with every meeting we have, let's record it all. Let's do transcripts with everything. And then let's throw everything into Gen AI in our private and secure system, and then have our Gen AI start writing the documentation for us completely. This is brand new for us. We're just starting to do this. The results are really, really interesting. It's actually very helpful, and it's increasing our speed. Just as a note, this is just a thought that I think about, is that 2 years ago when Sam Altman, ChatGPT, all the craze, one thing he said during that time that really piqued my interest was he said, someday with this technology, there will be $1 billion one-person companies, meaning that there will be people out there that know how to use this technology so well by themselves, they will build a $1 billion enterprise by themselves. I don't know if he meant 1 billion valuation or 1 billion in revenue, likely not 1 billion in revenue. But I remember thinking during that time, I said, I'm gonna be that person. And the reason outside of just hubris, the reason I thought that was because I've been training in this stuff since my PhD or my master's, right? So if there's anybody that understands how to use this thing, it's me. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do with Blue Fox Labs is we are an AI consulting company. We better be doing everything via AI, especially because there's no chance that we lay off anybody because there's only a few of us, right? And we're the founders. And so we've been actively trying to test everything. How can we grow this company without another human being added to our company? Obviously, I believe in human beings. I'm just saying this has kind of been one of our experiments, that if this is really true, then we should be able to do this with our company. I will say we're getting to the point where I'm we have to hire people. So I don't think it really works in real life, what he said, but we've gotten pretty far with this technology. And that should say something. Then, of course, we need to measure success and scale our prototypes. So, this is all, I feel like I don't need to tell you all, you need to teach me, but clear metrics, established baseline, this is just classic KPIs. We like to use a lot of statistics. This is, statistical and rigorous testing. This is gathering feedback, right? Of course, this is part of the whole customer discovery in the beginning, and then of course through the product design process, you need to gather feedback, analyze the data, and then this enables us to then scale, right? So once we get through the measuring success, and I'm just rushing through this because I think you all know this, then the scaling part of it is not make that current prototype bigger. The scaling part of it, okay, let's actually stop or just kind of continue to work on the use case that we were focused on, but then let's find other use cases, and then let's test those use cases against the solution that we already created, right? So let's see if the solution that we created can scale in the sense of not having to scale the technology, but to just add more use cases to it. And then this is just assessing resource requirements, plan for integration with other system data. Of course, over time, we want to get it out of this prototype environment. But interestingly, especially with Gen AI technologies, what's really interesting is that it generalizes pretty well. So once you start to prototype this against one use case, within your same company, it kind of generalizes well against other use cases as long as those use cases are somewhat in the same area. Like if you're doing accounting in one area, so that's another project that we did was within CFO accounting systems, and then you bring in other kind of accounting scenarios, it kind of generalizes pretty well. And then you continue this phased approach, right? Now, again, I'm assuming that nobody in this this conference is going to do business with me. I don't know why I'm assuming that, but I just want to throw out numbers just to kind of give you an idea of how crazy this is. Okay, so we've done projects with customers where, like, the whole process of this, from beginning to end, a consulting company has and does quote out 10 million plus for a project, and we've done those same projects for half the time under $1 million, right? And we're still making extreme profit on this, but we're also very, very small. I just throw that out there, not to brag or anything like that. I throw that out there because, like, things are changing right now, right? This is also why these bigger consulting companies are, I mean, justifiably, I used to work at one of these big companies. Like, they're trying to figure out what to do with the business. This is a real disruptive time, especially for these large consulting outfits. Oh, and then the other thing, this is probably the most important thing. So that example with regards to the digital to offline advertising, you know what was the biggest problem with that project? It was not anything to do with the build. It was the fact that all the people in the company thought that they were going to lose their jobs. That was it. Like, and that was a big deal. And did some of those people lose their jobs? Yes. Right? So that whole thing about change management, this was the biggest thing. That was one of our first projects that we did. We realized, oh man, like, we weren't even thinking about that because we're just like, oh yeah, we can do this with the technology. We can, and then we realized, oh shoot, like, there was a reason why it was so human intensive, because there was a lot of humans, right? And we learned quite a bit from that. We approach it differently now. And then, of course, monitor and iterate. And then this goes back to what I just said. So now when we come into situations, one of the things that we present, besides the whole technological side of things, is the challenge, the human challenge. One of the things we talk with the leadership about is, hey, whatever we figure out, this may displace people in your company. This may bring up situations, especially in private equity, where you all realize, oh, I don't even need this division anymore if we can figure this thing out, right? And so what we suggest to the leadership is, we're acknowledging this to you. We would prefer that you acknowledge this to the whole company before we get started, right? Because, again, I think we have to be honest about it. This stuff does have those kind of outcomes sometimes. And then we go through a process now where, actually, we're turning this into kind of a program. My co-founder, that's a social psych guy, he's turning this into his version of kind of a change management from a psychological, organizational psychology standpoint program, where it's like he's realizing the whole process of consulting has to involve this psychological component now, because this technology is so psychologically disruptive. So we talk about communicating clearly. This is for the leadership. Emphasize augmentation, not replacement. That's one thing that now the projects we take on, we basically self-select our projects and say, okay, we're not going to be involved in projects in which the goal is to just lay off a ton of people. So because we're a small company and we can just choose what projects we want, we're going to be choosing projects in which it's about augmenting the capabilities. And then, of course, provide transparency, but that doesn't mean that people can work their same jobs. That's the other thing that you'd be transparent about, is that we're going to create a place for you here, or these companies would say this, but you need to change what you do. You need to figure out how to do your job differently, or then you don't have a space here at the company. Involve the users in the process, and then, of course, provide training and support. And then, actually, lastly, I forgot about this. Celebrate human expertise. There's still, and will continue to be, a lot of things that AI cannot do. And so I think the more that we figure out what those things are, and then really be able to celebrate what we as humans can do better than the AI will ever be able to do, that's something that we're also really interested in, not only figuring out on the business side, but again, I have a research side of me, and so I'm trying to figure that out on the research side. And then feedback loops, this is just all kind of classic organizational change management directives. So I just ran through that, I apologize. So quickly, but again, the course is on my site. Transforming your business with AI is like renovating an old home. Take it one room at a time. I would love to take questions if you have any.
All right, do we have any questions out there?
Thank you. Hey, Joe, I'm wondering, there's a challenge with understanding what can be automated and what cannot. And when a business makes the decision to automate, I have an opinion that the pendulum has swung too far, that there's we're leaning too aggressively into automation.
Yeah.
And then we're left with complex situations that the AI can't handle, that the people used to handle, and those people aren't there anymore.
Yep.
And that causes processes and systems to break.
Yeah.
So it's just my observation. I'm curious about your observations of the same characteristic and how we can manage to find the right balance between automation and the places where humans are still going to be necessary to be in the loop.
Yeah, it's a great question, and this is just my thought and my opinion, okay? And I preface all this stuff, but hopefully you understand. I preface this stuff because I don't want to make it sound like I am negative towards any business or any industry. It's just a really weird time that we're in right now, right? So I don't know if like there's consulting firms represented here, like large consulting firms. I am not anti-large consulting firm. I'm not anti-business. But I think some of these structures cause or are part of why businesses end up kind of making suboptimal decisions, like what you're saying, automating too far, right? I think right now, one of the smartest things that any business could do is to, yeah, you might need to bring in consulting to have immediate help, but businesses, I think, should be thinking about building talent from the ground up, right? And building talent in AI from the ground up. Why? Because it's these people inside the organization that are not going to be, they're not going to be forced to, because of certain cost of things or certain kind of budgetary considerations or certain timing considerations, forced to make decisions that are too big and too fast that are not healthy for the company. Whereas when you're engaging with, for example, a consulting project, sometimes you're just forced into things because of the cost of how much it has to be for the consulting company to even work with you and to justify it and whatnot. And so there's kind of like this misalignment, right? And again, I'm not, no hate on anybody. It's just the reality of what sometimes happens, right? So one idea that I had, actually I was just talking about this with one of our offshoring partners, was there was one offshoring partner that was mentioning that, hey, why don't we just, this is like full transparency, why don't we create a team of people in this other country that are like 3 to 5 people that you kind of, I hand select as really good at some of this prototyping stuff. And then let's say that team in that country, a really good salary is like $40,000 a year, like premier, okay? So then for $200,000, you could get these 5 people and just assign it to a company. Okay, this is not like a directed consulting project. This is like, we're gonna take this team that I handpicked and we're gonna assign it to this company. And let's say, so it's like, I forgot the numbers I just used. So like $200,000. And then, maybe Blue Fox takes some markup on it, okay? But the focus of that company, that team is you're helping that company do prototyping. You don't have a specific SOW that is very narrow. But for 1 year, you're helping that company prototype with some of Blue Fox direction. But then part of that goal is to help people within that company learn how to do it alongside and then grow it from there, right? So it's kind of this like accelerator that gets assigned to a company that sits within that company. I have no idea if this works. It's just one idea that we had the other day, right? But that would be a different model as to getting at what I think personally needs to happen within companies. Because this talent has to, in my opinion, grow up from the inside. And I think then people from the inside will understand there is no way you should even think about automating this because those 5 people that have been here for 20 years, if they leave our company, we're done, right? Whereas no outside organization is going to be able to know that. they're not going to be able to assess that. So it's kind of a long answer, but I totally agree with what you're saying. And that's why I'm even hesitant sometimes, like when we're coming into companies. Like you got to understand, we don't really know your company, right? So this is kind of a catch-22.
Hi. So I'm Isabel Wen. I work with TEDCO. My question, I'm going to try to simplify it. How does the IP usually shake out for AI development, particularly with like these services? In some cases, the AI widget that you're creating can be an entire startup company on its own. So who owns the IP typically in these services when it's developed by a third party? And what if generative AI was used in the creation?
Oh, that's an amazing question. Okay, so I can only speak to my company. I feel like now I'm pitching my company constantly. But yeah, here's the deal. So, my company has no investors. Because I did a company back in the day where we had investors, and then I realized like I just got another boss. So this company, I said, okay, we're going to use our own money, bootstrap it, so we can control our own destiny. We can make any decision we want. What does that mean? What has that then done? Our beginning projects, we just said, whatever we build for the companies, the IP is owned by you, 100%. Any ancillary product, it's all owned by you, which is really terrible for us. But at that time, we didn't care. We were just trying to figure out how to do this stuff. And then, our, cool lawyers eventually moved us into phase 2 of the legal, jungle. And he said, okay, any ancillary products are owned by Blue Fox Labs, but all the primary SOW covered products are owned by company, right? And that's kind of more typical that you'll see in consulting today, I think. Level 3 is, okay, because our overhead is so low, we're open to agreements with companies where if you want to pay us this like really small base, right, then we can negotiate on pricing where, because we know that our thing is going to provide your company value and we're going to calculate it as such, then we get a percentage of how you're making profit off our product, or we get some piece of the IP of this thing that we're making for your company. That's just like the progression that we've personally made. I'm guessing no consulting company is actually doing anything like that, but who knows, maybe. But that's the way that we've thought about this, because you're right, like there's so much potential IP coming out of this. Your last question, that's a really good question, right? Because if things like GitHub Copilot and Cursor AI are coding this stuff, right, which those things I guess are patented or copyrighted technologies, and they're coding stuff that we're using that to code, but then that stuff is all generative AI created, then is it like graphics where you can't assign a copyright to it because it's actually made from previous works? That I have no idea. That's a really good question. I actually think another area of businesses that are going to pop up is obviously going to be in the legal field, and specifically with these issues. It's going to be, I think, huge business.
Hello? Oh,
Yes.
It works. Cool. Hello, my name is Logan. I am an AI researcher. So I like
cool.
to stay up to date on a lot of AI technology. And
Nice.
right now, AI is a big
Hire
buzzword.
him.
What? Already hired, too late.
Oh, okay. Give him a raise.
So right now, AI is a massive buzzword. There's a lot
Yeah.
of money being fed into these
Yeah.
AI startups. I think that there's an interesting divergence where we'll see some companies like Amazon try to replace their customer service agents with AI, with the Rufus AI that came out recently, for example. But then there's also another route where there's this Japanese company, I forgot the name of, was making an AI to convert whenever people were yelling at their customer service agents over the phone, it would convert them yelling into a much calmer
Ooh,
tone of voice.
that's so Japanese. Seriously, if you know Japanese culture, that's so Japanese. I love it.
Do you think that there is a lot of money being fed into this right now by larger players because they see the ability to lower the cost by removing people from the workforce?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I won't talk about Amazon too specifically because I do a lot of work with them, so I don't want to say anything negative. No, just kidding. But they're cool. Yeah, so for example, you guys know the payments processing company Klarna. They're all about like marketing what they're doing with AI, and I think a lot of it is just trying to get PR out there. Although obviously it's probably a cool company. It clearly makes money. But one of the things that they recently announced, which I'm still trying to is this real? Is that they said that they removed their Salesforce and their Workday ERP. Okay? They completely ripped it out of their company because they used generative AI to code up their own ERP that's more customized for them and their own CRM that's customized for them. Okay? Like, really? Is that really possible? That is massive enterprise software. Is that possible? But then it got me thinking, okay, if that is possible, okay, then it should be very easy to then deal with the kind of, Salesforce has a help desk ticketing component to it, right? So these kind of things, like if you can actually replace Salesforce with this Gen AI created solution, then you should probably be able to create the components, or you're saying you created the components that can do things like what you're talking about, right? Which is customer service, handling help desk tickets. I don't know. It's like if Klarna has been able to do that today, and this technology is so immature, and when I say it's immature, folks, I'm telling you right now, we are in the, whatever you want to call this, like, baseball analogy. People say the first or second inning. I'm talking batting practice. We are so early right now. This technology, and the reason why I say we're so early is because nobody really understands what this stuff does. And that's why you're getting these completely, you have Jan LeCun at Facebook, who is their head of AI, right? Famous person. He's saying that we will never in human history get to AGI with this technology because there is no possibility that this thing is reasoning, okay? And he's an expert. And then we have Geoffrey Hinton that just won the Nobel Prize for Physics, is an expert, and he's saying we have existential threat coming within the next 10 years, okay? And these two people are extremely intelligent in this field. The fact that these opinions are so widely varying, right? If you know stats, right? The variation, the standard, it's huge. Variance is big. Why? Because we're so early. We don't really understand what's going on, right? And so that's why right now it's like anybody can say something, and you're like, maybe, I don't know, right? And then the companies like Amazon, Microsoft, they've got to keep pushing ahead with this stuff, right? And being as helpful and profitable as possible. So that's my thoughts with that.